Bret sweeping across the Lesser Antilles on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for June 23rd. Tropical Storm Bret is still the main feature. Of course, it's passing over the Leeward Islands predominantly over the course of this evening. And behind it, Tropical Depression 4, which formed in the morning on the 22nd there, and could become our next named storm in the Atlantic. Busy start to the season it has become on day 23 of a hurricane season in the Atlantic. Both of those systems active in the main development region. We don't really expect it to happen there in June, but nonetheless, here it is. Bret still fairly strong, but it has really let itself go in the last few hours. Day 41 in the Eastern Pacific though, and we've got a high chance of development now for the next 7 days for a potential system that could be scraping along the western southern coast of Mexico over the next period. And behind that, a 30% chance for potentially another system over there as well. In the Western Pacific, we've also upped chances for a 40% chance now for a system that could develop in the Philippine Sea. So this is all pointing towards maybe a busy week next week in the Pacific. In the Indian Ocean, no designated systems, but there is a gnarly looking little burst of cloud there, which is causing a lot of heavy rainfall over eastern India right now. But no actual areas of interest that we've marked for potential tropical cyclone development. Let's take a look at some satellite imagery across the world. You'll notice that Indian burst on the rain rate view in the last 24 hours. Some really heavy rainfall there in the red. Bret's influence is very small, as you can clearly see there in the Atlantic. Not much to it, but I imagine rainfall will be locally heavy in some areas and it could cause flash flooding. It's not always the amount of rain, sometimes it's the rate of the rainfall. Here's the live look at the Eastern Pacific Basin right now, and you can see here as the day ends and we transition to the infrared imagery. There is a lot of disturbed weather over there, but nothing really getting itself organized yet. Fascinating little burst of thunderstorms over Haiti right now, could also be causing some flooding problems. But there's Bret, and I must say it's a bit of a shell of what it previously was. It has let itself go a lot in the last few hours. I would say that 60 miles per hour might be generous. National Hurricane Center, I think, is still giving it 65. And looking further east, another system there, that's Tropical Depression 4L. It must be close at this point to reaching tropical storm status. National Hurricane Center did not upgrade at their last advisory. Their next one will be at 3 a.m. UTC, which is about 3 hours after this broadcast, after the Tropical Weather Bulletin goes out. And there's the water vapor imagery, quite a lot of dry air around it. Wind shear though will really get the better of Bret fairly soon, and we did expect that it would start weakening near the islands. Oceanic heat, well, sea surface temperatures, not on the OHC yet, but very warm temperatures along the coast of Mexico, really warm there for that 70% chance system. And in the Atlantic as well, a few select areas too. Western Gulf really warming up now as well, a few spots getting above 30 degrees there, but mainly around Cuba, really warm temperatures. Where Bret is right now, it's reaching its peak around 28-29 degrees Celsius near those islands, and behind it 4L around 27 to 28 degrees. Western Pacific looking really good as well, around the Philippines where we're looking at potential next system, very high temperatures over 30 degrees Celsius. So these systems that we're talking about for next week all tracking over warm waters, indeed some of the warmest in their respective basins. Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea looks like it's losing a little bit of heat actually. That does happen with the winds that get up there. And in the Bay of Bengal, still very warm conditions above 30 degrees in a few spots. Southwest Indian Ocean is pretty much done, of course, for the winter, and temperatures continuing to recede there. The Australian region, a similar story. Even up in Darwin, temperatures only around 26 degrees off the coast. And in the southern Pacific, a lot more regimented line there, but temperatures are gradually receding. That will continue until around September. Sea surface temperature anomalies well above average in the Atlantic, as you can see, partly responsible probably for these two systems, Bret and 4L. The Eastern Pacific there, the El Nino effect, looks like it's still coming on stronger. Very warm anomalies there, and so it looks like we're in for an El Nino event on the way soon. And in the Eastern Pacific off the coast of Mexico, looking good as well. Oceanic heat content extremely high in the Western Caribbean. Where Bret is right now, it's decent, and where 4L is, it's getting there. In the Eastern Pacific, also a few decent spots there as well. As I always say, it's certainly better than what we saw last year, which was really low. And in the Western Pacific, extremely high values for the Philippine Sea as a whole. That's fairly normal, but a little bit worrying to look at. GFS computer model for the next 5 days then shows Bret continue off into the Caribbean Sea and gradually dissolve as it eventually washes up along the shore of Honduras, Nicaragua, and then you see tropical depression 4L behind it, which is probably a short-lived tropical storm there. There's been question marks about whether the later part of this system it might regenerate as it moves up past Bermuda. GFS was very vocal about that in earlier model runs. We'll take a look at how that looks now in a minute. But the Eastern Pacific, look out for these two systems that form both within the 5-day period now that the GFS wants these two cyclones. The one on the left has the higher chance, that's the 70%, and it is quite a broad system. It's little and large almost. The smaller one on the eastern end of the basin, forming quite far down actually, not far from Costa Rica, and there it is. Might actually be a tropical storm before the bigger one, and both of them getting to a decent strength. Western Pacific as well, looking out at this 40% system from the GFS. This is what it generates. I think it is the most aggressive of the models so far, but there are a few other models in agreement, so we're not just going off the back of the GFS. 40% chance there. That's a system that wraps up into a tropical storm towards the end of that loop, towards day 5. When does it exactly happen? Around about there. That's the 27th, so 4 days away, and it could be a threat to Luzon. And looking at the rainfall expectations for the area being affected by Bret right now, St. Lucia is going to that gets the worst conditions from the storm, not just with its winds and probable landfall, but with its rainfall. And we expect rainfall maximums here, adding on a little bit that might happen later on next week from probably another little wave. Full total over there, 8 inches probably, which is 200 millimeters. Nearby islands, looking up to Martinique, 4 inches, just a bit above that, and 4 inches as well in Dominica, 2 inches in Guadeloupe. 4 inches there, that's 100 millimeters, 2 inches 50, 2.7 in Barbados on top of what they may have received so far from the storm, and 3.5 inches possible in St. Vincent and the Grenadines on the southern side there. So all in on the act there, potentially getting some significant rainfall in that 7-day period. Longer range, watch out for the remnants of 4L. Do they regenerate? It's a big question here as to whether it's the same system or not, but there is another system that does develop there and nearly gets back to tropical storm status. Much different than what the GFS was saying yesterday when it was forecasting a substantial hurricane actually, and into this morning as well, a substantial hurricane it wanted to move up past Bermuda and out, making a recurvature. So it's backed away from that a lot. What happens in the Eastern Pacific? Those two storms, the eastern one getting much stronger earlier because of its small size, I assume. The western one doesn't have quite as much time, but they both get to hurricane status. They both could threaten the coast of Mexico, but at the moment it's looking like neither of them will make an actual landfall. But tropical storm force winds could spread all along that coastal region of Mexico there, but they are quite used to that at this time of year, as the Eastern Pacific wave train looks like it might be about to start rolling. Western Pacific, what happens to that other system? I must point out that other models take it further west. It could end up in the South China Sea, but here's the GFS there. It actually shrivels up very close to Taipei, and what's left of it is just hovering around the Chinese coast, moving northwards eventually, but it gets to a decent peak intensity there, probably high-end category 2 just before it reaches the westernmost Ryukyu Islands, and then on towards the northern tip of Taiwan. Interesting. Still a way to go before we get there. That's all the serious stuff done. You can take a look at the Force 13 merch store, scan the barcode on the top right, and that will teleport you straight there to it. You can take a look at all our items, including our full season, individual Storm animations, and our still waiting for Hone t-shirt. And on that picture, I don't think I fit into any of those clothes anymore that was on that video. In the silly range, this is what else happens in the Eastern Pacific. Further to that other system that's currently 30%, it starts to weaken away, could be a threat to the southern part of the Baja California Peninsula, but that is way out in terms of time, and it's folly to try and predict exactly what will happen to that. So certainly keep your eyes peeled all along that western coast of Mexico, Pacific coast, over the course of the next 2 weeks. You can talk about all of that and whether I can fit into those pants anymore or not on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13, where you can chat about the tropics with over 3,400 in our community around the world. Well, on this day, it was June 23rd, 1991, when we had a strong Category 3 Hurricane Carlos, which was active at this point, looking decent on that satellite imagery, and 1 or 2 questions as to whether it may have reached briefly Category 4. And we also had Tropical Depression 4E, which would eventually become Tropical Storm Dolores in the next few hours off the coast of Mexico. That would also have a decent life. I think it got to minimal hurricane or somewhere near that as it gradually moved northwestwards quite close to the coast of Mexico. So that season in 1991 there was well underway in the Eastern Pacific. Well then, back to this year. The next name on the Atlantic naming list is tantalizingly close at hand. It's Cindy. In the Eastern Pacific, we are still waiting for Adrian, and it's still going to be at least a few days away. And in the Central Pacific, of course, we're still waiting for Hone, as we have been doing for nearly 4 years. In the Western Pacific, the next name on list 5 is Talim. In the North Indian Ocean, it's going to be Tej. No sign of that one coming up yet. We're probably going to be in our quiet period now until that North Indian Ocean second peak around about October. And in the Australian region, the next name is Jasper. Southwest Indian Ocean, Gazani, if it's in the next week. And in the South Pacific, it's Lola. That's all from tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.